welcome to the fourth adventure in the Congo campaign that I'm playing. Right, now before I forget again, just want to tidy up one thing from the third game, and that is that the Pygmy King here, whose name is Hamago, was actually killed in the previous game. That is, that he was his figure was removed from the table. So the only thing that I forgot to do finally at the end of the last game was to roll to see what his condition is. So you roll a d6 and 5 or 6 is a success and he's fine. 1 to 4 is a failure and his health deteriorates by 1 level. So we rolled a 4, so that's a fail. So unfortunately for Margot, he too has now gone down to a poorly state. Right, so that's done. We're now journeying between that adventure and the next, and Mary Kingsley, as the victor of the last game, gets to choose the route that she wants to take. And again, because she's keen to get some of those medicinal plants if she can, we're going to go for Through the Thriving Jungle, I think it was. Just thumbing through the rule book here to try and find the relevant page. Here we are. Yeah, Through the Thriving Jungle. So for Mary, she rolls 1d8. And she's rolled a 4. A success means that the journey takes 3 months. A failure means it requires 4. So here's her log sheet. 1, 2, 3, 4. And unfortunately she doesn't have any bearers who could reduce that time down. The only one she had, if you remember, was eaten by cannibals. Right, and then there's a random events table. So we roll another d8. She rolled a 3, and it says you come across a small village, one inhabitant of which decides to join you. Add 1 auxiliary to your expedition. Tick off the appropriate box on your travel log. So finally she's got her bearer back. So we put across there, and that's the end of her journey. Now Ujuwa gets to choose one of the other 2, and he is going to go for Over Swift Water, which is the riskiest one, but the rewards are greater. And in Ujuwa's case, it's the only one that allows him to tick off boxes in this spiritual link chart. All the others, whether a success or failure, he has to strike off boxes. So this is the only way that he, other than performing successful rituals during the game, that he can increase this score here. So over Swift Water, then he rolls a d6, and he's rolled a 2, which is a failure. So he ticks off just 1 box here. This is where the wording is quite crucial, because there's a difference between ticking off a box and striking off a box. Striking off a box is actually removing ticks. Okay, so the next thing he does then is a random events chart for Over Swift Water. So again, he rolls a d8 for this. 2. No. This happens every time. Cannibals have attacked your camp. So they've carried off one of your auxiliaries, striking off your travel log. Well, as it happens, he hasn't got any auxiliaries, so in a way, he had nothing to lose by doing that. But really wish that he could pick up something to help his condition in his campaign, because he's really going to have to pull something out of the bag in the next game in order to have any chance of winning the campaign. Right, so that's everything as far as I can think of that we have to do. So now we're on to the next adventure. Right then, here we are with the table laid out for adventure number 4. Now this one is called Unknown Species and Stone Statues. It's played in jungle terrain, as you can see. Basically, there are 6 areas of high dangerous terrain, and this is D10, so it's as dangerous as you can get. And inside each jungle piece of terrain, there is a token to be revealed, numbers 1 to 6. They represent fragments of 2 statues, one made of jade and one made of obsidian. Forget which is which, but 1 to 3 is one statue and 4 to 6 is the other. And the object of the game is not only to collect the pieces of statue, but you get bonus victory points if you can if you have the entire 3 parts of a particular statue. Now there is also in this scenario, on top of all the rules that come in the rule book, and on top of all the rules that are now being added with the campaign experiences, so players being able to ignore dangerous terrain effects and replace cards and replace stress tokens and so on. There are rules in this scenario that I'm going to have to try and remember. So the other thing, apart from collecting these statues, is there are 4 pieces of blocking terrain, so they can't be entered. But if you can get a group adjacent to any of these 4 blocking terrains, then you remove the marker and you roll on a random table to see what you've discovered. It could be something grim, it could be something worth keeping. So there's that element, and then on top of that, the rules with the scenario need to be remembered, and they are that it's a 7-turn game. The 7th turn is a variable length, but it's certainly a longer game than the previous ones we played in this campaign. The 2 factions come on as columns. So here you got Mary Kingsley's column, and on the other side of the table here you got Ujuwa, and Ujuwa's column is kind of paralleling Mary's column and tracing her movements, tracking her basically. Both sides are exhausted at the beginning of the game, so you have to roll for each group in order to see whether they gain stress tokens or indeed even lose figures. In turn 1 there's also a downpour, and again in a later turn, I forget which turn, I'm going to have to remember. And finally, the whole area is littered with animal bones, so it's apparent that this is an animal sanctuary. So you have to roll on a d6 to determine which type of animal. It could either be a gorilla or a lion. and depending on which it is, if you retain in your hand and don't play the totem card with that particular animal depicted on it, you gain points at the end of the game for having done that, rather than have used the card during the game. And there's something else as well. There's just so much now. I'm finding it very hard to kind of keep everything in my head and not forget to do things now. As I say, I've just forgotten a final rule. It's going to have to come back to me. So anyway, what I'm going to do is do all that dice rolling off camera, because there's quite a lot of it to do, and then show you the results of that before we actually start playing the game. Right, here we go then. So the exhaustion rule proved pretty disastrous for both sides. If you roll a failure, then you take a stress token on a d8, and if you roll a 1, you remove a figure as well. So the scouts there have already lost 1 figure. There's a few more stress tokens on various groups there. Over here, even worse, the adventurers lost a figure, but I used the reckless rule to replace the loss with 2 additional stress tokens. There's another panic token here on Mary Kingsley's group, who also lost a figure, so they've lost a soldier. And the sanctuary is a gorilla sanctuary, so this gorilla figure is just there for decoration, just as a reminder to me that it's a gorilla sanctuary, and if players hold on to the gorilla totem card, which is quite a valuable card, it's 2 additional movements, movement actions. Instead of, if they sacrifice that and keep hold of the card, then they will gain some extra victory points at the end of the game. And the rule that I'd forgotten is that traps are also allowed in this game, and that involves, if you play a totem card, if you sacrifice a totem card and nominate an opponent's group which is in dangerous terrain such as this, the group have to roll a d6, and a failure on that means a loss of a figure, I believe. Can't remember, I have to look that up again, but so that's another additional rule on top of all the others. I'm going to have to try and remember, but anyway, here we go then with the next exciting instalment of Mary Kingsley's adventures. So end of phase 1, turn 1. And both sides have done more or less the same thing using different cards. So 1 group from each column is approaching one another with the object of meleeing or shooting, throwing spears at one another. On the other hand, the rest of the actions was basically attempting to remove or rally off stress tokens. So the Ujuwa's group still have a panic token on the pygmies there, who can't do anything until that's removed, but Mary's group got rid of absolutely everything with some really remarkable dice throwing. And I think, no, I don't think they did use any tokens. It was all down to the dice. They got rid of absolutely everything. So phase 2 should see a little bit more movement. And again in phase 2, very similar actions from both sides. Mary Kingsley's column moved first, so they attacked these young warriors here, beat them in melee and drove them back. And then the group of young warriors with the reporter that I've also added the bearer to now. So this is my strongest group, I feel, now on Mary's side, because it's got lots of strength and abilities there. they are moving towards the first of the blocking terrains to see what the discovery might be. Whereas on Ujuwa's side, the group of scouts are close to getting into that dangerous terrain there. And this group of bundukis have moved up to counter the threat posed by these askaris here. Okay, so this is the situation at the end of turn 1. The askaris have fired muskets at this group here, who took 1 loss and an additional stress token for being fired at by muskets, and that group there now have another stress marker because they had an influence put on them by Ujuwa's side. The most interesting thing to happen though is that when this group had to draw a stress token, they've immediately drawn the wild animal token, which in this scenario is a leopard. So there is now a leopard on the table, and his rules are quite interesting. As I understand them, at the end of each action phase you randomly choose an area of dangerous terrain. So he is now in number 1, what I've designated as number 1. I rolled a d6, and at the end, as I say, at the end of each action phase you randomly move him, and he can move really swiftly, but it's from one piece of dangerous terrain to another, so he doesn't actually ever leave dangerous terrain. But if there is a group in the terrain that he moves to, then he attacks that group, and he's only removed from the table if the group inflict 2 more kills on him than he does on the group. So he could be in play for quite a long time. And as I say, that's just about everything that's happened at the end of turn 1. So on now to turn 2. Right, end of phase 1 of turn 2. The bundukis here have now opened fire on these guys as well. All the stress tokens on that group though were subsequently rallied off, and the scouts here have reached that first part of the statue, so they now have that in their possession. And here the reporters group reached the blocking terrain, but the discovery was a misfortune, bad luck, and they lost a totem card chosen at random. They only had 2, and the leopard is now in this dangerous terrain here. End of phase 2, turn 2. The leopard has been placed in the same terrain as he was before, so no, nothing changed there. These scouts reached that blocking terrain and discovered some magical plants, so that will help in the campaign. At one point when they were in this dangerous terrain, Mary tried to set a trap for them but failed, tried to use the traps rule. This group here with the reporter entered that dangerous terrain, drank some poisoned fluid out of some demijohns they found, and had to draw a stress marker in order to heal the bearer, who is with them somewhere in there. There he is, that guy there. And the adventurers have moved towards this dangerous terrain. Let's try and collect that token, and lots of movement, so these figures are all getting moving now, whereas Mary's side still has a couple of groups that she hasn't activated yet. End of turn 2. The Askaris here have lost a figure from the pygmies shooting at them. This group rallied off their, well, it didn't rally off, they reloaded their muskets, and the leopard is now in this area of dangerous terrain. So, as I was saying, the rules for the leopard are slightly different from some other wild animals. So he's hidden and concealed and just moves rapidly from one area of dangerous terrain to another. So he'll only attack if he's placed into an area that has figures in it. So, in other words, that he's not going to stop these adventurers entering this dangerous terrain. It's just going to be ignored, basically, because at the end of the action phase, he may have left and ended up in another area of dangerous terrain. But if it's randomly the dice decides that he is still in there, then he will attack anything that is in there. And right at the end here, the scouts have picked up a token, a stress token from an influence, and the reporters group rallied off a stress token that was there. I think that was everything that happened. So now on to turn 3. Okay, end of phase 1, turn 3, and quite dramatic events. This group of adventurers have turned up another fragment of the statue, but in entering the dangerous terrain, they managed to trigger the night rules for the rest of the game. Now, basically, under those rules, visibility is reduced to M from L. And if you want to pick up the pace, so in other words, if you want to increase your movement distance, you have to draw a stress token from now on. So the rules are meant to replicate either nighttime conditions or heavy fog. So what I've done is gone for the heavy fog option. So as you can see now, the table is covered in a sort of dense fog stroke mist. And figures are moving but picking up stress tokens as they go, unfortunately. So as both sides were moving quite a lot in that turn, in that phase, there has been a lot of movement, but there's also been a lot of stress related tokens being picked up, and the leopard is now up in this area of dangerous terrain here, so no attacks from the leopard so far in the game. So on to phase 2 of turn 3. On this end of the table, the pygmy archers have had a little bit of success in that they have killed the Kirangozi, so another character suffers an injury in the campaign. They inflicted 1 casualty, and unfortunately the terrifying death roll came up as 1, which meant the Kirangozi was the casualty. And here the other group of them, which had bonded, used the bonded rule, so they fired arrows, shot arrows at the adventurers and killed one of them. And using the reckless rule, they drew 2 stress tokens rather than remove a casualty. And up this end, didn't go so well for the reporters group either, that they reached the discovery marker, but it turned out to be another mishap, so they had to draw another stress token. But they had rallied, I think they had rallied some off anyway. And the leopard hasn't moved, not because I forgot to move him, but because he threw for that area of dangerous terrain again. So now we're on to phase 3 of turn 3. Right, so in that phase, it's mainly rallying off and ineffective firing and so on, but the scouts here have turned over another segment of statue, and also rallied off. They did that in the previous phase actually, and then rallied off a stress token. The most dramatic and interesting thing to happen though is that the leopard moved into this area of terrain down here, which is actually occupied by two groups, the adventurers and the pygmies. So you randomly determine which group it's going to attack. So I rolled a dice, and the dice said it was attacking the adventurers, and the leopard gets to roll 5d6, and the adventurers only have combat value of d6, so they had 3 figures, so it was 5d6 against 3d6, and this is what happened with the roll. The adventurers rolled 3 6s, so 3 successes. The leopard rolled 1 success and 4 misses, and if you get 2 more kills than 2 more hits than the leopard is killed, and you get a trophy, hunting trophy for it. So really successful outcome there for Mary Kingsley's side, because they now have a leopard hunting trophy. Okay, quite a dramatic opening phase to turn 4. I'm trying to hurry as many figures as forward as possible on both sides. So Mary's group had to draw a stress token as a result of moving in night conditions at that speed, and lo and behold, the leopard is back on the table again. And not only that, but it landed back in the middle of this same piece of dangerous terrain, and once again randomly the dice decided it was going to attack the adventurers, who came off the worse for it this time. So what I've done is basically I've decided the result of the melee, as it were, was that they were to lose a figure. So they used their reckless rule to draw 2 more stress tokens, but when you retreat, which is what they're supposed to do, you have to draw a stress token anyway. So they're now on 4 stress tokens, and I've decided that they would have dropped their loot, which is what you would do in a melee. So now that is up for grabs, and possibly the pygmies or another group might be able to pick it up next turn. So as I say, I was just trying to move everything as far forward as I could. So up this end of the table now there's a bit of a race between the reporters group and the small group of scouts to try and get to these final objectives. There's a discovery marker there, there's another statue fragment in there, and another one in here. So see who reaches those before the end of the game. Right, in that phase Mary's group predominantly rallied off a lot of stress tokens, 1 from here, 2 off of the adventurers, and 2, was it 2 or 1? All of the stress tokens that the reporters group had anyway have now come off. The leopard now finds himself up in this area of dangerous terrain up here, and Ujuwa's group mainly had a successful shooting action against the Askaris there, had spears thrown at them from the young warriors, and another Askari was killed. And here that group of pygmies has picked up that segment of statue. So it feels like this game is going more in favour of Ujuwa. I don't know, difficult to say, but it certainly feels that way. So on to the final phase of turn 4. That's now the end of turn 4. I'm having sort of to interpret the rules now you know, they're not. I'm not entirely sure how they should be the correct interpretation, but this seems right to me. The adventurers decided to attack these pygmies, try and win back the segment of statue, but it was an equal fight, and in those cases the defender is obliged to retreat. But I don't think, if it was an equal fight, that the pygmies should drop the statue and the adventurers pick it up. So I've moved that with them. That's how I've played it in the past anyway, and I think that seems right. Up here, it's the first time I've ever come across this, because it's the first time I've ever played the leopard. But in order to move from one terrain piece to another, the leopard has to roll a success on a d8, and he failed. That means he has remained in this area here with the reporters who have just moved into it. Now, it says that the leopard attacks on deployment, but he hasn't been deployed. He was there already, so I don't think he attacks the reporters group in this go. They have just lost 2 figures anyway, because when they entered the dangerous terrain, they found it to be infested with fang vipers, and the vipers actually poisoned 2 of their number. It was a bit of a disastrous dice roll. So I think that's enough bad luck for them for the time being. And they also picked up a stress token as well. Panic, so they can't now move. And apart from that, I think that's everything that's needs to be reported on. So now on to turn 5. So that was another phase which mainly dealt with handing out or removing stress tokens. The leopard has moved now to the middle terrain piece. The scouts here did move though, so they are quite close to picking up that other segment. So after that there will just be this one discovery marker here to find out what that is. And as I say, not much movement, but a lot of attempts to try and rally and so on. So fairly uneventful phase. Okay, the scouts and the forest tribe side are proving very useful this game because of the scenario. They can enter these dangerous terrain without rolling on the dangerous terrain table. I've been forgetting about the traps rule though, I must admit, apart from the very first turn, forgetting to apply it. But anyway, they've picked up 3 segments of statue so far, so that's pretty good going. The reporters group is still in this area here, having picked that one up I think the turn before. So the only other uninvestigated item now is that marker there. The leopard didn't move, so he's still in the centre of the table. And this group of Rugga drew a stress token and used a totem card, so they've moved quite a long way over the table now, because I've basically got a few groups that haven't really seen much action. And yeah, that's about it. So now on to the final phase of turn 5. So that's the end of turn 5, and the scouts are very close to reaching this blocking terrain now and making this discovery here. And down the other end of the table, the leopard has moved, and that's because he seems to have acquired a taste for adventurers, because he ended up back in this dangerous terrain here, and fought with the adventurers, killed one of them, so they drew 2 tokens for the reckless rule rather than remove a casualty, and they also drew another stress token as a result of the melee itself with the leopard. So they've definitely, well, they bagged one, but the other one is really causing them a problem. And here the Ascaris are now down to one figure because of the shooting arrows, being shot at by arrows from these pesky pygmies. So that's the end of turn 5. Now on to turn 6. Okay, the reporters group of warriors actually won the race to the final objective and turned up a geology artifact, which is good news for Mary Kingsley's side. Down the other end, excuse me, this Ujuwa's group has got a little bit closer to these Rugga now, so there's probably going to be an exchange of missiles or some fighting there. This group moved into the dangerous terrain and were attacked by a family of gorillas, so I moved the gorilla a little bit closer to them just to portray that. And actually they lost 2 figures in that, so it wasn't a particularly wise move going in there for no reason. The leopard remains where he is, and the final Ascari figure was finished off by the pygmies' arrows. So awful lot of figures from Ujuwa's column still down this end of the table, but they have achieved quite a lot in terms of damaging Mary Kingsley's characters and so on. Killed Kirangozi. Right, so on to phase 2 of turn 6. Right, these Rugga here got badly damaged by the arrows from Ujuwa's group there in that phase. Other than that, not a vast amount happened. There was a bit of rallying off of stress tokens. One came off of there, and as I say, not much else happening, and the leopard remains stationary. So we got one more phase of turn 6, and then you roll to see if you go on into turn 7 after that. Right, that is the end of turn 6. There was a little bit of exchange of missiles here. Ujuwa's group probably came off the worst. They had to take a stress token and they lost 1 figure, but the most dramatic thing here was that the leopard moved into the only piece of dangerous terrain currently occupied, so it really was a bad move, those warriors going in there, but fate was on their side because they've actually managed to kill the leopard, giving them a hunting trophy as well. So things have turned out pretty good for Ujuwa. So the only interesting thing now is up this end here. These two sides of these two groups are very close to one another, and they hold 5 out of the 6 statue segments. So if the game were to continue, and if there were to be a melee, the winner of the melee would pick up all 5 statue segments. So it's sort of all or nothing in the final throes of the game, really. So I'm just going to roll the dice in front of you. So it's a D8, 5 or more, and the game continues at least 1 more phase. Yeah, it's a 5. So 1 more phase. Excuse me, one more phase at least. Right, so this is the area of interest really now. Mary's group were really unlucky in that they drew 3 cards, all unsatisfactory, because they wanted a movement card that would allow them to go into melee with the scouts, because they had a good chance of picking up those 3 other statue segments. Even by swapping one of their cards out, they had no movement cards whatsoever, not even passive ones. So the best they could do was to shoot at the scouts in the hope of eliminating them. They piled in loads of additional dice using totem cards. I think they threw 5 or 6 dice and didn't get a single hit. It was then the turn of the forest tribes, and the scouts just scarpered completely. They paid the penalty for extra movement. They drew an extra. They played an extra movement totem card. They're well out of reach now. So even if the game were to go the full length of 7, the full length of 3 phases of turn 7, they're going to hang on to those 3 segments now. So that's what we've got to decide now, is to roll the dice again and see if it goes on another phase. So 5 or more and it will do. Yep, 5 or more, so there's another phase coming up. Right, that was quite a passive phase with a little bit of movement but no melees, and some infliction of stress points, terror tests and so on some of the groups, but that was about it. Nothing dramatic. So will there be a final phase to turn 7 or not? If I roll 5 or more there will be, and I roll a 2, so that is the end of the game. So yeah, I thought that was one of the best scenarios I've played out of this book so far. I really enjoyed that. It looks to me as though Ujuwa might have actually won this game. I've just got to do a lot of tossing up of various victory points and so on, and then I'll come back to you with a summary of the points scored and so on. Right, that was a bit of an epic. It's got this continuing problem that there's so many rules that you have to keep in your head. There would be for a normal game of Congo, but with the added experiences and talents and so on, plus the scenario rules that they've introduced and the new rules for the campaign, there's quite a lot to keep abreast of, but I managed it fairly well. Didn't really play the traps tactic that often, in fact only once. Not sure that was a brilliant move to make anyway, because it involved spending totem cards that are probably more value actually using for their purpose. And the one thing that I didn't do, which I don't think would have made a difference, but I didn't. Mary has got this talent now. This is Ujuwa's chart, but on Mary's talent, she has got exchange, an action card. So possibly at the end she could have, because in that final couple of phases she didn't have any movement cards at all. She might have been able to acquire one, but I don't think it would have been a higher priority than the card that Ujuwa's side played, that allowed the scouts to avoid a melee and losing their statue segments. So I think that, yeah, I don't think that made a big difference. So who won the game? Well, it was, as I thought, Ujuwa came out on top in that one. He scored 5 victory points for holding 4 statue tokens, whereas Mary scored 3 victory points for holding 2. Ironically, the 2 segments that Mary did hold came from the 2 separate statues. One was jade and the other obsidian, and had Ujuwa owned all 3 segments of one statue, he would have scored more victory points, but in the end it didn't affect the outcome. Both sides held 2 gorilla totem cards in their hand at the end of the game, so because it was a gorilla sanctuary, they got 4 victory points each for that. Both sides made 1 discovery each. Mary discovered a geology artifact and Ujuwa discovered some magical plants. so they both got 4 victory points for that. Both sides got a loot token, which I forgot to put on the table, but again, didn't matter. I don't think it affected anything. Both sides got a loot token for killing a leopard. Now, when you do that, you roll 3d6 for each loot token, and every success gives you a victory point. So both sides, I've done the dice roll off camera, neither side scored any victory points from that dice rolling at all. And finally, Kiva, the Kirangozi, was eliminated from the game. So you roll 2d8 per star, and he's a 2-star character. And Ujuwa got 2 successes from that, so scored another 4 victory points. So in total, Mary ended up with 11 victory points, and Ujuwa ended up with 17. So he won the first game of the campaign, his first game of the campaign. Now, so we can cross off game number, what was that, number 4. So he gets 2 points for that. In terms of rituals, successful rituals performed, he performed 5 successful rituals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't show any of those on camera because they really just usually involve a bit of dice rolling and picking up a totem card. So he is now up to 3 points for that. He discovered magical plants, so he's got another magical plants one there. So that hasn't altered anything, the score. He needs another one to get up to 5 points for that. What else? Yeah, because if you had all 3 segments of a statue, you automatically gain a domain of knowledge, and neither side did. So whoever in this game, where is it? At the end of the game, should neither player be in the situation where each owns all the pieces of one statue, the player with the most statue pieces acquires 1 domain of knowledge. So he now gets sacrifices, and that means that he has now got 2 domains of knowledge. So his character is going to go up in the next game from a 1-star to a 2-star character, with added dice abilities as well. I can put that on the log sheet for later. And he got 1 hunting trophy, which was the leopard. So I think, for once, probably speaking too soon, but I think I've got everything complete there. Now, as for Mary, she found geology, so she's got another one there. And Kiva was eliminated, so we got to roll to see what's happened to him. So I think he rolled a d6. Just check that again. Yeah, you roll a d6. And oh gosh, sorry. Dice are let's do this one. Success, so he's fine. He doesn't go down to poorly state. So that's one bit of good news for Mary. So nothing to change there. Likewise, she's got a leopard hunting trophy now, and doesn't increase any domains of knowledge. So I think that's the end of her log sheet filling out. but experience wise, we can now go back to Ujuwa. So the winner, Ujuwa, rolls a d10. He's rolled a 1, not brilliant. Oh dear, poor old Ujuwa. Never does well at this. So 1 is no bonus. Apparently you have learned little from your recent trials and tribulations. Oh well, nothing to do about that. The dice are the dice. And then the loser rolls a d6. She's rolled a 1 as well. So again, no bonus. So none of the characters or anything have got any bonuses. So the only change to any of the characteristics is Ujuwa is going to go up to a 2-star character. And that is everything, I think. So thanks for watching again, and again, for the adventure number 5 I'll do the journey to it as the preamble of the next game. See you on the next video. Bye for now.